Okay, this video is going to go over the CentOS 7 installation. One of the first screens you get to asks you to select the language, so we're going to pick English. Then you come to this screen where there are a bunch of options of things for you to set. Most of these grayed out things are what you can visit to set the different options. I clicked on the time zone. I'm just going to leave it where it is because that is a proper time zone for me. It's on 24-hour clock. That's fine. The time is 10:47. The day is the 9th, so it's perfect. Click on keyboard. Don't think I need to change anything. US keyboard. That's great. Language support, we already picked English. The installation source, I booted this VM from a DVD, an ISO image actually, of the DVD. So that is correct. We are doing the minimal install because we are building a server, so we don't want to install a bunch of stuff we don't need. We're just going to install what we need as we go along. Now these next four things, we're going to, three of the four things we'll have to make some changes. KDump, let's look at that. It says here, KDump is a kernel crash dumping mechanism in the event of a system crash, blah, blah, blah. So really, that's going to save some stuff if you have a system crash. It uses some of your memory for that. So in reality, if you're not expecting to have any crashes, you don't really want to use that because it's going to use some of your system memory. So we're going to not enable that. What if we get a crash? Well, we can go back and enable it later to capture that dump file if we start getting system crashes. Security policy, we'll click on that. We are not going to apply a profile. These are things where you can set rules to make your system compliant with some of these standards. We're not going to do that. Installation destination. This is one of the more interesting pages to do the install. This is where you can set your partitioning settings. It's set for automatically configure partitioning. The other option would be I will configure partitioning. If you want to configure your own partitioning, then you're going to have to do a lot more work. We're not going to do that right now. We're just going to get the system up and running with the automatic partitioning. After the system is loaded, we'll examine what it did. Encrypt my data might seem like a good idea, but if you select encrypt my data, you will have to basically enter a passphrase every time the system boots. And since this is a server system that you're not going to be in front of the console for, most likely, that's probably not something you want to do on the server system. So basically, I said a lot of words on this page, but we are going to go with the default setting of automatically configure partitioning. So we don't need to do anything on this page. Network and host name. This is definitely a page we need to do some stuff for. For your host name, we're going to set that to your username, which in my case, I'm going to set it to rbe0000.cnt.lab. Hit apply. We need to configure our network. So we're going to click on configure down here. It's going to come up with this little GUI looking thing. We want to go to the IPv4 settings, and we want to set it to manual. And you are going to want to set it to the IP address that I gave you. Hey, did you see that? My number lock key wasn't on by default. So if you start typing with your number pad and it doesn't work, hit the number lock key. So we're going to set this to whatever IP address I gave you in the file to set your IP address to. I'm going to use 192.168.240.140. So 24-bit net mask. For the gateway, we'll use 192.168.240.1. And then for DNS server, 100.100.102, which is a DNS server I have in the lab using a fake real IP address. So that is all we need to do on this page. Make sure you use your IP address from the file and not mine. Hit save. And we want to turn that on. If you don't turn that on when your system comes up, it will not be up and ready to go. You'll have to go fix that. So that is all the settings we need to change to install. I'm going to click begin installation, and it's probably going to take 5 or more minutes to install. So I'll probably stop the video and then start a new one of what we should do after the install is finished. Wait, I lied. There's a couple more options we need to do while it's installing. One, we want to set the root password. I am going to tell you what to set the root password to. So make sure you set it to what I tell you to set it to in case I need to get onto your system to fix things. It is a weak password. All right, user creation. We're going to go ahead and create a user for ourselves. Like I said, my username is RBE000, so I'm going to create that username. You want to create whatever your username is. So if your username is DCV4678, 4567, that's what you want to set your username to. Again, I'm creating my account, so my user ID goes there. Require a password for this account? Yes. Set your password to whatever you want. I do not need to know your password. And that is all we're going to do right now for this user. There's some other options here that we'll go over later, but we're not going to change anything else for this user. So go ahead and get done. All right, so it's going to finish installing. It's at 212. It's going to go to 299. Once it finishes, it's going to do some post-install tasks, it calls it, which is going to be when it sets the root password and does the user creation. So I'm probably going to stop the video and continue on once it finishes with a new video. All right, so it did take about 5 minutes for 5 or more minutes. I don't know, I wasn't really timing it. I was browsing Reddit. It did take a few minutes for it to finish the install, the post-install task, and do everything it needed to do. So once it's done, you get to this screen. It asks you to reboot, and you will need to hit reboot to actually reboot it. So I hit reboot. It's going to reboot and come back up, which should be pretty quick. So we'll wait for it. All right. If you want to hit enter, that'll speed things along to pick which kernel you want to boot. All right, and there we have it. The system is now back up and ready to be used. We connected using VNC to load the system, but now that the system is up, we no longer need to do that. Now that the system is up, we can connect using SSH. So you want to go to whatever tool you prefer to use for your SSH client, and then you want to connect using SSH. For now, we're going to connect as root because basically I said so. So you'll want to do SSH-L root and then your username from whatever SSH client you want to use. In this case, I'm using Terminal on my Mac. It should be noted that for this to work, you need to be connected to the VPN, which you should have already been connected to do the install. So this should work for you. First thing is going to ask you to authenticate the fingerprint, SSH fingerprint on the system. You could verify that if you wanted. Nobody ever does the first time you connect. So you say yes, and then put the root password that I told you to set. And it should, then put the root password that I told you to set, and it should let you in. So there I am. I'm logged in as root on my system, and I'm ready to go about my business and do whatever else needs to be done. A couple things I want to point out. If you see this, for me, it says enter passphrase for your key. I have SSH keys set up, so it's asking for my key passphrase to try to use my key. It would not have worked on this system because I have not set the key up on this system yet. And then it asked me for the password. So if you ever have a passphrase and you're trying to log into a system that doesn't have keys set up, then you can ignore the key and just put the password. If you're like, Rich, what are these keys you're speaking of? Well, good news, we will be setting up keys in the very near future for your system, so you'll be fully aware of what I'm talking about after that video. So that takes care of the install process. Your system is up and working. You can SSH into it, so that means pretty much most likely you have all the settings ready and where they need to go.